Round 7 of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship comes from a rather wet Snetterton. The cars making their way to the grid shortly for the first of 2 one-hour races. We've only got 3 more rounds of the championship to go. Silverstone, second weekend of November, a 3-hour race, but here in Norfolk it is the, if you like, traditional format of the 2 one-hour sprint races. Pit stops between 25 and 35 minutes, different times for the GT3 and GT4 cars, plus, of course, the success stop that you get, the extra time added on for the results in the previous race. Yesterday, started wet, dried a bit, never got warm. Today, started dry-ish, got wet, got wetter. And the warm-up session this morning had 2 red flags, lots of people in strife, and indeed Richard Neary crashing his ABBA Racing Mercedes with such force that it's going to be a non-starter from the first race. He also did a fair chunk of barrier damage, so the timetable has slipped rather, but more importantly, sadly, we have lost the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes, at least from race 1. So it's going to be a fascinating race. It'll be a safety car start, and the cars, as I say, will be released from the pit lane very shortly. There you can see the cars good to go. It's a field which is perhaps a little smaller on number than initially hoped at the very start of the season, but it is still a very high quality field indeed. And in these conditions, let's find out who is going to be in charge and whether indeed the road will ever get to dry to make people think about a change from wet Pirellis to slicks by the end. David Addison and Andy McEwen. Trackside, it's been a great season, Andy, thus far, with in GT3 a different winning combination every time out.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that the grid size perhaps is a little smaller than we might have liked, but the level of competition across that grid has exceeded all expectations, I think it's fair to say. 6 different winners from the first 6 races in GT3, and in GT4, pretty much every GT4 car on the grid has the potential to be on the podium,
yes.
And we have at the moment the top 4 teams in GT4 with 3 races to go, covered by 2.5 points. 2.5 points at this stage of the season. That is remarkable. It's been a great year, hasn't it?
That has indeed. And, you know, for TF Sport, running 2 Aston Martins and having those cars at the top of GT4 tied on points illustrates, yes, how competitive, yes, how evenly matched as well they are. It's got a bit too close for comfort on occasions between the TF drivers. Now, here is number 69, the car that's going to start on pole position. Sam Dehaan did the time. It was a qualifying session yesterday that was on a damp and drying road. It was damp enough for wet tyres to be the go. And for much of it, Rob Collard looked like he was going to be on pole position, but Sam Dehaan got there in the end just by really 0.2 of a second. And so it's Mercedes from Lamborghini at the front of the grid. Good that quite a number of fans are braving the elements here, masks on, and keeping themselves at a safe distance, but it's good that the GT cars are being able to attract fans, and for many, of course, with other forms of motorsport not being open to fans, GT racing is getting a new customer base, isn't it?
It is, and about time too, really. I've always said that GT racing, GT3 racing in particular, is rather an underrated form of motorsport, really. The cars are great, they look great, they sound great. The racing is fantastic as well, and it's really nice to see that it is starting to get the attention that I've always felt it deserves. Cars then heading out onto the grid now, David, and I believe we can hand over to a welcome returnee to the team this weekend. He wasn't able to be with us last time at Donington Park, but we do have the pleasure of welcoming Kelvin Fletcher back to our broadcast. Kelvin, good morning.
Hello guys, I am smiling under this mask. It's great to be back. Great to be back here. What a wet, cold Snetterton this is. But for me, that always brings a sense of adversity and a sense of jeopardy, which for us spectators makes for some great racing. Now, it's so good for me to be back. Obviously, I miss Donington. Unfortunately, it's one of those rarities when the day job gets in the way of racing. Unfortunately, I was filming for a BBC drama, but I'm back now, back in my happy place. And it's really, really good to be. I can't wait for a great race today.
A BBC drama taking away from GT cars. I can imagine that. Other broadcasters are available, incidentally. Now, there is a car that is deserving of a good result, the Toyota Supra. The car will be started by James Kell for the purposes of race 1. He shares it with Sam Smelt. Speedworks Motorsport, the team, but it all falls under the Toyota Gazoo Racing UK banner. It's got the Gazoo Racing livery, and this car makes a great noise. Say this with confidence, having stood trackside yesterday for qualifying and listening to, because it's always been a feature of GT racing, not just the different shapes and sizes, but the sounds of the car as well. And there are some great noises amongst the GT4 brigade.
Yeah, there really are. And this Toyota has been a bit of an enigma this year, hasn't it? It started off the season at Alton Park really competitive. It was in the mix for race victories right from the word go. They didn't quite get the podium at Alton Park, but they were on the podium in the third round of the season at Donington. And then since then, they've had a number of issues really crop up throughout the year, and it would be nice to see them getting that first victory of the year, and perhaps in these wet conditions today, that might be their chance. Well, GT4 this year has been super competitive. The championship is very finely poised, arriving at Snetterton. It is TF Sport on top in GT4. The 97 and 95 cars tied on points with 3 races to go. Jamie Caroline and Dan Vaughan are winless this year, whilst the 95 of Conor O'Brien and Patrick Kibble have 2 race victories to their name. It's a really evenly matched squad at TF this year, perhaps a bit too evenly matched. That contact at Brands Hatch that they had in the late stages of the race at the end of August is not something that Tom Ferrier and the team will be keen to replicate in the remaining rounds of the season. Their nearest competitors at the moment are Academy Motorsport, the Ford Mustang GT4. Matt Cowley is here this weekend with a new co-driver, no Jordan Albert this time. They were winners at Brands Hatch in round number 4, and the Mustang is getting quicker and quicker as the year goes on. As for HHC Motorsport, they have 2 cars in the fight as well. The 58 car of Jordan Collard and Patrick Mathiasen, our most recent winners in GT4, are 4th in the points, whilst the 57 car of Gus Bowers and Chris Westmail are only a handful of points behind them. 5 cars realistically then in the GT4 Championship battle, with 3 races to go. It's going right down to the wire once again.
So there the grid starting to take shape, and one of the 2Cs McLarens, Andy, has ground to a halt on its outlap, number 9 I understand that to be, which means that the car that Dean McDonald is behind the wheel of is stranded out on the circuit, and they possibly could delay the start. Now, is that as simple as a kind of Control-Alt-Delete reset and fire up the car, or is it rather more serious?
Well, there's nothing obviously wrong with the car, which does lead you to suggest that it is something maybe electrical, and we're hearing that the car just slowed on its way out to the pit lane. That's coming out of the very first corner as well, so it's been a bit of a trouble spot already today. 2 cars off there in warm-up, including a McLaren, the number 2 example of James Baldwin. But that's a shame for 2Cs Motorsport. It's been one of the stories we've been following all year, hasn't it, David, really? Those cars, the 10 and the 9, have both been quick. They arguably should have won the very first race of the season at Alton Park if it hadn't been for a penalty, and they'd locked out the second row of the grid today. So it was we were hoping that perhaps they could get their first victory of the year, but if 2Cs are to win today, it will not be the number 9 car, at least in this first race.
Absolutely. So another team on the back foot. So there is 78. That's going to have Rob Collard at the wheel of it going into the first stint. That, of course, one of the cars that has had a win in the ultra-competitive GT3 class.
GT3 Championship led by Ram Racing, Sam Dahan and Patrick Kuyela, winners last time out at Donington Park. They are just under 10 points ahead at the top of the tree. It's been a great season for these 2. Sam Dahan transitioning from Lamborghini to Mercedes with much success. Speaking of Lamborghini, Barwell have 2 dogs in the fight. The 78 car of Rob Collard and Sandy Mitchell, winners at Brands Hatch, are only 9 points off the top of the championship table in this Rob Collard's first full season of GT competition. Their teammates Adam Ballon and Phil Keane in the 72 car are 3rd in the points, 7.5 points further back. They won both races at Snetterton last year and will be looking for a repeat. If they can do that, they could well head to Silverstone for the championship decider as the points leaders. 4th place in the championship, the first winners of the year, the Jensen Team Rocket RJM McLaren of world's fastest gamer James Baldwin and the very talented Michael O'Brien. 1 race victory to their credit this year. They've been struggling in the wet a little this weekend though, so their chances perhaps of scoring big points here at Snetterton could be limited. Still though, it is an ultra competitive class. The championship is still far too close to call.
So we are looking forward to seeing whether we can have our first double winner, or indeed keeping this amazing record intact of a different winner each time out. Well, there is a car that has had a win already this year, because the car in the hands of Sam Dahan and Patrick Kuyela won at Donington last time out, with Rob Collard lining up alongside. So you've got Ram Racing and Barwell at the front of the grid. Second row, Jordan Witt for 2Cs, and then this gap where Dean McDonald's car is going to be. So what should have been an all 2Cs second row for the McLaren, then rather all at sea, I'm afraid, with 1 car there and 1 trying to get itself back onto the grid. Now, further back on the grid, only 10th is where you find the Ferrari. There's a story attached to the car's pace, or relative lack thereof, no doubt. And Kelvin Fletcher is the man to ask the questions.
Hey guys, I'm here with Matt Griffin in the Ferrari, the lovely green Ferrari. I've got a confession to make, Matt. Obviously, I was supposed to be racing with Bentley this year, but this is actually my favourite looking GT3 car. I think it looks amazing, but sadly, with the weather conditions, as you were telling me before, it's almost too good on its tyres, and you just can't generate enough heat for these wet conditions.
Yeah, that's it, Calvin. Obviously, British Racing Green is good for a British Ferrari, but yeah, the work that Ferrari did over the winter with the Evo kit was mainly for the car to be better on its tyres and easier on its tyres, which is always an advantage, apart from if you're at Snetterton and it's very wet and about 4 degrees. So this weekend it's been a handicap. We're working hard with Pirelli just to try to get some temperature into the tyres, because at the moment we're out on the wet tyre, we're outside of the operating window. But the team are working hard. We've made another kind of, hopefully a big step for the race, and it's just to try to get some tyre temperature. Tyre temperature equals grip, and grip equals speed, and that's what we need at the moment. So it's been a bit of a struggle, but I think it's going to be a tough race, and it's going to be as well about speed and about who stays on at the end.
Right, well, hopefully, fingers crossed, the Ferrari will be there,
yeah,
chasing the front and be up there.
Hopefully. Thanks
Thank you, guys.
Well, if anybody can deliver, it is Matt Griffin, isn't it? There's one of those great sights in GT racing, which is to unleash Matt behind the wheel of a Ferrari, because he just goes flat out. You can see the car come alive. Now, OK, as Matt makes the point, these conditions may not necessarily showcase his nor the car's ability, but he remains a great guy to watch in a Ferrari. Rob Collard then making this very successful adaptation from touring cars into GT racing. He started off as a oval racer, of course, like his father, the late McDuffie Collard, but Rob raced successfully in 1600cc hot rods and national hot rods, came into circuit racing initially in the Formula Ford British Championship in the ZTEC Formula Ford era, then to the Vectra Challenge, then to the British Touring Car Championship. And a sorry sight is that we've lost another car from the grid. So Dean McDonald's car then is back in the paddock, and that's the surviving 2Cs Motorsport Mclaren there. Jordan Witt at the wheel of it, but massive frustration for the team. I mean, you get through practice, you get through qualifying, you get through the warm-up, you get out onto the track, and then something goes wrong.
That is the trouble, though, with wet weekends, isn't it? Water gets everywhere, including many places where it really shouldn't be, and that may well have been the problem.
All right, let's try and find out more about 2Cs. Kelvin, what do you know?
Well, I'm here with Jack. Obviously, he's in the sister car, so it's not really your problem, is it? But the other car, your sister car in the team, is unfortunately just didn't make it around for the green flag. Do you know what happened?
Yes, and from what I've been told, as they were driving out on the outlap, they've broken down twice, and they don't think the championship can risk them starting the race just in case anything happens. So from what I believe, they're towing them in now, and hopefully they can get the car out. Such a shame, because they've had quite a difficult year with breakdowns and a few other issues, so it's a shame for them. But not bad things. It's quite damp today out there as well, so maybe starting the back and avoiding the carnage might help them out a little bit, you never know.
And I guess for you guys, you're obviously up at the sharp end of the grid. This is hopefully going to be an incident-free race for you, and you can get some well-needed points.
That's what we're hoping for, yeah. It's going to be quite difficult in these conditions, especially to get past, because it's kind of only one wet line, so to make the move is going to be quite difficult. But Jordan's doing well, he's working hard, so hopefully we can make them 2 places up and have a fight for the win.
Well, that's our cue. The race is starting soon. Let's go racing.
Kelvin, thanks very much indeed. So, yeah, big disappointment for 2Cs. Jordan Witt, Jack Mitchell's car then is going to be the survivor, as it were. But for, sadly, Dean McDonald and Angus Fender, they non-start. We've lost the Mercedes as well, the Team ABBA racing car. So 2 gaps on the grids, plural, because, of course, GT3, Andy, start ahead of GT4.
Yes, they do, just to try and avoid too much mixing up of the classes in the first few corners, which are notorious here at Snetterton at the best of times for creating drama. It's a real pinch point, not so much into that first corner, Riches, but into the second corner at Wilson. Not uncommon to see a bit of contact there, and in these conditions, that is definitely something that will be on the driver's mind, particularly those who are trying to guard championship points and keep themselves in contention.
It's going to be a safety car start, remember, rather than a rolling start. You might think, well, they always start behind the safety car, but it's going to be an official safety car start, so the clock starts when the cars leave the line. And we understand that the 2C's number 9 McLaren, if it is able to start, will start from the pit lane, so it's not going to be prevented from racing if the team can get it going. We're in business then. Round 7 of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship is underway. The cars leave the line. They will run, of course, in as close to grid order as possible, with people being now in the pit lane or non-starters until we get the green flag to go racing in earnest. There you see the GT4 cars leaving the line as the field pours through. Andrea Calderelli in the red Lamborghini goes through, but to give you the start drivers in grid order, Sam de Haan then for Ram Racing Mercedes start at the front. Rob Collard in the Barwell Lamborghini number 78 is second, and then it's Jordan Witt in the 2Cs Motorsport McLaren third. Dean McDonald, if he starts, it will be from the pit lane now in the sister car, so that will promote up into 4th place Ian Loggy, yet to win this year. Could this be his day? Sharing with Yelmer Berman, and Lewis Proctor will go from 6th on the grid in the McLaren that he shares with Ollie Wilkinson. James Baldwin, really good in karts and really good on the sim in wet conditions. What can you do in real world racing? As away goes number 9 McLaren then from the pit lane. Michael Igo, winner at Donington, sharing with Andrea Calderelli once more. He starts 8th ahead of Adam Ballon. And then Duncan Cameron in the Ferrari, the 2 Italian cars on the 5th row with work to do. Nick Jones, Donington winner in the wet, remember, in August, goes from 11th. Stuart Proctor, sharing with Joe Osborne, is going to be 12th on the grid. And then the gap where you would have had Richard Neary means that Jordan Collard and Gus Bowers are next, the 2 teammates for HHC Motorsport, 58 and 57, the top 2 qualifiers within GT4. Then it's Dan Vaughan, who lost 2 of his lap times yesterday to track limit abuse. Conor O'Brien lining up alongside him in the 2nd of the TF Sport Aston Martins. Will Moore goes first in the Academy Motorsport Mustang. Brilliant noise that car makes. Matt Cowley a winner in it already this season. James Kell starts the Speedworks Toyota Supra, and Andrew Gordon-Colebrook is in the Century Motorsport BMW, the first of the 2. Mia Fluitt, winner at Alton Park for Balfe Motorsport, comes next, and Ben Hurst's BMW will complete the grid. In GT3, in terms of success penalties, 10 extra seconds to the pole car of Sam de Haan, 7 for Adam Ballon and Phil Keane, 5 for James Baldwin and Michael O'Brien. In GT4, 10 extra seconds for Jordan Collard and Patrick Mathieson, 7 to Will Moore and Matt Cowley, and also to the Andrew Gordon-Colebrook Ben Tuck BMW, a carryover from Brands Hatch, and 5 for Conor O'Brien and Patrick Kibble. So keep that in mind as well as we get near the pit window. And of course, a safety car start, a safety car period within the first stint is bad news for those teams with the pit stop penalties, because they're getting less chance of stretching the gap, aren't they?
Yes, and of course, primarily that affects this car, the 69 Ram Racing car, which is started by Sam de Haan. They have this 10-second success penalty for winning last time out, and their championship rivals, the 78 Barwell car alongside them, has no success penalty. So Sam de Haan's job in this first stint is to pull at least a 10-second lead over Rob Collard and the rest of the field, indeed, from second place on back. And that, as you quite rightly say, gets harder the longer we spend behind this safety car.
Now, the one good thing, I suppose, is that because it's a 1-hour race, it's a short stop. And therefore the penalty is less than it would be over a longer distance. You make the point about the Barwell car on the outside of the front row not having any success time to serve. And of course, Barwell Lamborghinis have a great track record here. Phil Keane in the Adam Ballon car further back on the grid, 5 wins out of the last 8 races here. So conditions withstanding, it still looks as though the cars to watch will be the Barwell Lamborghinis. Now there, look, Dean McDonald, he's joined in from the pit lane, but of course he can't overtake yet because we're under safety car conditions, so he has to sit at the back of the field. The good news is that the car at least is in the race, and 1 or 2 of the teams wanting the safety car to go quicker, because the drivers are relaying back to the teams that they're not being able to go quick enough to get warmth into the rubber, to get the pressures in the tyres up either.
Yeah, exactly. It is fairly chilly here today, and although you don't want these wet tyres to overheat, they do need to get up to their optimal operating window, and that is hard to do when they're running around at safety car speeds. I don't think, David, that it is raining anymore, though, is it? So this does present us with this interesting sort of dynamic here. If it does get significantly dry before the pit stop window opens, we may see some teams take a gamble on slick tyres. But what we've seen all weekend is that it's taking a long time for the track to dry out because the ambient temperature is so low. So, and indeed you can see there is still a fair bit of standing water around.
and there's also still a little spot of rain or two, but you're right, it's not as bad as it was for the start of the previous Formula 3 race, I'll grant you. If there's one team that might roll the dice, Team Parker Racing and the Bentley, because it's not a car that really relishes the wet weather, so if you're going to struggle, you might as well struggle and gamble. So if anybody's going to roll the dice, that could be the team. Look what happened at Donington, it really played out in their favour. But we are at least 20 minutes away from the pit window opening, and it could get wetter in those 20 minutes. It could get drier, but the point remains, and Polar Bears here are backing it up, that it is a very chilly weekend. Lights are still on the safety car, so there's at least one more lap. Quite often you find that the safety car will stay out for 2 or 3 laps at an increased pace. So you'll start off at a safe pace. The next lap will be quicker to bring the tyres up to temperature. The third lap quicker still, so that the drivers have got a lot more warmth in, ready to go. Now, we've touched on the fact that there are 3 rounds of the championship to go. Calculator at the ready, Andy. Can it be won today? Can it even be won in this race?
It can't be won in this race, but it can potentially be won in race number 2. We work off, as Tom Hornsby from SRO dubs it, the 13-point rule. Next time at Silverstone, it's a 3-hour endurance race, so we're back up to the maximum points haul for that race being 37.5 points. Now, for any driver to be, or any team to be more than 37.5 points ahead of the opposition, at the end of the day, they have to be at least 13 points ahead of the opposition after this first race. So to put that into some perspective, there are 9 points at the moment separating Ram Racing's number 69 car, which starts on pole position, and Barwell Motorsports number 78 Lamborghini. If that gap is more than 13 at the end of this race, so in essence, if Ram Racing beats Barwell in this race, mathematically, they could wrap it up in race 2. But whilst it is possible, and the same goes for GT4 and indeed all of the subclasses, Pro-Am, Silver, they can all be won today, I think it's rather unlikely.
So, November the 8th, Silverstone, we want it to go down to the wire, probably down to the darkness, because how much light we're going to have on the 8th of November remains to be seen. We're going to go racing this time. Safety car is in. Remember, these laps, we've now had 2 of them, all count within the hour. So for these drivers, and largely it is the, in quotes, the slower driver doing the first stint here. Perhaps it's less relevant, but you know, you've lost that opportunity to stretch the margin. It certainly is going to matter as far as Sam DeHaan is concerned, as he tries to pull out 10 seconds over Rob Collard. It really is going to be a really intriguing fight to the pit stop window, and of course what we have after it once the order has shuffled accordingly. So here at Snetterton we are ready to go racing. Number 10 there, Jordan Witt on his toes. Whoops, almost off the road, as well as he had a curious look to the inside at Agostini and then tried to sort out the line for the corner. Everybody exploring where the grip levels are or are not at the moment. Also the one to watch will be number 9, waiting Dean McDonald, graduate of the GT4 scene, to see what progress he can make. And there you can see the spray still generated by the Ram Racing Mercedes. That's the car of Sam DeHaan and Patrick Kuyler. Patrick Kuyler, for my money, has been one of the most impressive drivers this year. I know that he's a good name in international GT racing, but largely in Lamborghinis. And what you tend to find is that people, because they sign for a brand, a manufacturer, they are only allowed to race that car. So people get pigeonholed as being a specialist in a Ferrari, a Porsche, a Mercedes, whatever it might be. But here you've got Kuyler racing for Barwell in GT World Challenge Europe in a Lamborghini, and for Ram in British GT in a Mercedes, and he's an absolute star in both.
And competing against Barwell for the championship in British GT, which that must lead to some very interesting conversations when they're out in Europe. But that's not an easy transition to make either. The Mercedes drives very differently to the Lamborghini. They're built and designed completely differently. They make their lap time in very different ways. And so to be able to, sometimes on a weekly basis, flick backwards and forwards from Lamborghini to Mercedes and back again, that takes some skill. And Patrick is clearly a very skillful driver.
Yeah, he never really shone, did he, in his single-seater days up to GP3 level. Came across into Lamborghini Super Trofeo and just rewrote the book, and was picked up by Lamborghini, dropped into customer programs around Europe, and Barwell having a very happy relationship. But at Ram Racing, he will do the second stint. Sam DeHaan, another ex-Barwell driver, of course, with Rob Collard second in the queue. They are set to go racing. Round 7 of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship from a wet Snet is good to go. Green flag flies. We are now racing. End of lap 3. Safety car peels in. and everybody blasts down towards Riches. That was the view from on board Rob Collard's Lamborghini, through the spray, through the gloom. Sam DeHaan leads Collard, leads Jordan Whitney, and Logie goes through. Fourth, Lewis Proctor. Fifth in the Optimum Motorsport McLaren. Sixth is James Baldwin. But right now, it is Jordan Whit all over the back of Collard, going for the inside line at Wilson, takes second place away. That was a really bold move. They almost lean on each other. Rob Collard gets forced out wide. Jordan Whit is coming through. Mate, no argument about that. As up front, Sam DeHaan is already getting away as now the GT4 cars accelerate into business.
Yeah, it's the HHC McLarens at the front, still Jordan Collard ahead of Gus Bowers. Grid order then in GT4, but as you said, already some changing at the sharp end. Rob Collard doesn't look especially comfortable here, does he? Now Lewis Proctor looks around the outside into Agostini, and off goes Adam Ballon. Oh dear, third place in the championship, and the 72 car will restart, but right at the back of the field.
Absolutely, yes. So Adam Ballon gets away, but he's going to fall a long, long way off the pack, isn't he, there? As 96th, then, the Lewis Proctor-driven McLaren threads its way through the infield. Look back, though, from the leading car. Now, Sam DeHaan, I was about to offer you, was getting away. No, he's not. Jordan Whit, as they come now onto Bentley Straight for the first time, is going after him as the cars accelerate their way down now towards the Brundle-Nelson sequence, but Rob Collard is struggling, no doubt about it then. The Lamborghini dropping back in the pack, so it is DeHaan in the lead. Second, it is then Jordan Whit. Third, making good progress, Lewis Proctor. And fourth, through the gloom, is Collard. Fifth, it's Ian Logie in the Mercedes. We were suggesting in the warm-up session to one another that these were not McLaren-friendly conditions. The turbo car with that almost switch-like application of the power. Well, nobody has thought to mention that to Jordan Whit nor to Lewis Proctor, because they are both gaining ground.
Well, that was the story we got from the Jensen Team Rocket squad, because they've been struggling in the wet, but it seems that 2C's Motorsport and Optimum have very much got those cars dialed in, and as you say, at the moment going after, and indeed taking the race lead. Look at that, Jordan Whit. Oh, no, there's contact between the two of them. Sam DeHaan, the championship leader, is on the grass, and down to third. It's those little moments that could so easily define a championship, but now it's side by side almost between the other two McLarens. Whit has the lead. Proctor looks to the inside into Riches. He's late on the brakes. He can't quite get through. Well, they've had to wait 10 minutes for this race to get underway, but now that it's started, boy, are they going for it.
Not entirely sure Sam DeHaan needed to force the issue quite like that. It didn't do him any good in the end, did it? Because he's lost ground as they both go deep into Wilson, looking for the grip on the outside line. So the first thing that your eye thinks is, oh, they brake too late, they're going on the wrong line. But they find a bit of traction on the outside. We saw it in the Formula 3 race earlier. They'll go wide here through Palmer. Look, not the usual line, but it does work in these wet conditions. So the two McLarens then, two different teams, 2Cs ahead of Optimum, leading the way. In third place is the Mercedes of Sam DeHaan, but looked like it was getting a gap early on, as now to the inside line goes Proctor. Can he find a way up on the inside line there? Jordan Whit closes the door. In fourth place is the recovering Collard. Logie fifth. Baldwin is sixth then in the Rocket RJN McLaren. But Jordan Whit doing a really good job here. He's worked his way up into the race lead, and now he's hanging on to it.
At the start of the season, there were a lot of murmurings about how there were so many McLarens in the GT3 field this year, but neither of these two cars have won a race yet this season. So for all of this talk of McLaren domination, these two are still looking to get onto the top step of the podium. Neither of these have a success penalty either, so this is a really, really strong start to the race. And Jordan Whit just needs to try to get his head down now. He is a good driver in the wet, has experience racing the Big Bentley and other series in the wet conditions pretty well, and we know how hard that car can be to drive in slippery conditions. The McLaren, though, looks good here at Snetterton. Lewis Proctor going with him. The gap back to Sam DeHaan is already over 2, maybe even 3 seconds as they go down through Brundle and Nelson. Collard fourth, and Ian Logie in fifth position. Adam Ballon, by the way, did not pit after that spin that he had at the start of the race, so no damage done. He is in 11th place, but that is a team that cannot afford to be losing too many points.
Absolutely right. And also Dean McDonald, 15th, up from the back of the grid, effectively. So Jordan Whit, who, if you remember at Donington in the mixed conditions back in August, was in all sorts of strife. He leads the way at the end now of lap 5. Jordan is a man that likes a car with aero. He was thinking about having a season of Carrera Cup. Indeed, the week before the first round of Carrera Cup and British GT, he was at Donington testing a car, and by the end of the week he decided to race the McLaren in British GT. He much prefers aero and the downforce and the confidence that that gives. Well, there won't be a huge amount of confidence in these wet conditions, but what there is, he is taking, and he has now done the fastest lap of the race. Jordan Whit leading by 1 second from Lewis Proctor. Sam DeHaan is third, Rob Collard is fourth, Ian Logie is fifth, sixth is James Baldwin, Michael Igoe is seventh, eighth is Duncan Cameron, Nick Jones is ninth, Stuart Proctor is 10th. Now what's going on in GT4? Right now it's an HHC 1-2. Jordan Collard leading the way. There, he's about to lose a place on track because the GT3 McLaren of Dean McDonald will go by. But right now, Jordan Collard is about 3.4 seconds to the good over his teammate, Gus Bowers.
Yeah, who is under increasing pressure now, isn't he, from the 97 of Dan Vaughan. Conor O'Brien, likewise, watching his mirrors to try to keep the 61 Ford Mustang, behind. On board with Conor O'Brien now as he takes the defensive line towards the Wilson hairpin. Is there a Ford Mustang-sized gap on the inside? Well, there is, but the grip is very much on the outside, as David was saying, and so for now the Mustang stays behind. But in GT4, all of these cars are championship contenders, so any one positional change between those top 5 will have significance when you consider the top 4 teams in that championship are only 2.5 points apart.
If you were really confident of what's going to happen later in the day, you'd almost possibly think about the pit stop strategy. Do you want to have the good result here and carry the success penalty into the next race, or do you want it in the second race? But then the danger is that it's a bigger penalty for a 3-hour race at Silverstone. So if you could read the future, you'd be able to plan accordingly. But right now, with GT4 being so evenly matched, every place absolutely matters, and the class leaders broken up by the number 9 McLaren working its way through. So the HHC twins effectively were together. The gap only really appeared because of the GT3 car, Dean McDonald's McLaren, coming through from the back. Now, these are arguably ideal conditions for GT4 cars because they don't have as much aero, they don't have as much downforce, and in the wet you can really see the cars moving and sliding. Very much the same on the damp track in qualifying. Getting it now with the Mustang there all sideways coming up through the section of Hamilton up towards Bentley Straight. But up front, the lead gap is down fractionally because Lewis Proctor has now done the fastest lap of the race. He's closing on Jordan Witt once again. Sam DeHaan, I think, has now stabilised his pace, as has Rob Collard. They are still 3rd and 4th, but of course DeHaan is going to give away a further 10 seconds in the pits.
Yeah, so at the moment he would fall comfortably behind Collard, so as far as the points are concerned, advantage Barwell at the moment, at least as far as the 78 car is concerned. These two cars not particularly preoccupied about championship points, they just want the win. And at the moment they seem pretty evenly matched. Yes, Lewis Proctor set the fastest lap, but as you can see there, he was only 28 1,000ths of a second quicker than the race leader, and he keeps taking these quite aggressive lines. He's turning into the corner early, he's taking the tight line through some of these slow corners, maybe trying to distract Jordan Witt, force him into a mistake. That could work, but it's definitely not the quickest way through. You can see the gap is now stretched again after Proctor had to go into Agostini.
That's right, so the 2 McLarens, but all it takes is one tiny error or a little bit too much opposite look, and that's the Bentley of Nick Jones off the road. Talking about a tiny error, he's nearly joined the wrong part of the circuit. So far off has he gone, but Nick Jones then in the TPR Bentley getting back onto that bit of the circuit. Dean McDonald has to take to the grass in avoidance. Nick Jones sees him at the 11th hour and jinks out of the way, but it is all happening in these torrid conditions. So yes, back to the original part of the sentence. All it takes is one tiny slip and the gap that you've opened up can suddenly be right back down again. And it's Jordan Witt who arguably here has got the tougher task. Partly the pressure, courtesy of Lewis Proctor, but also he's the pioneer every lap through. He's the one that is the first to discover the puddles, the grip levels. Has it improved? Has it got worse from the previous lap?
Yeah, Lewis Proctor can kind of gauge from the reaction of the number 10 car in front how much more he can push on. So it is maybe an advantage to run second in this situation. The disadvantage is that you're getting a face full of spray and visibility can be a challenge, although that it looks as though Lewis is dealing with that pretty well at the moment. Across the line they come. This is the 7th lap in the books. We are nearly 20 minutes in and still only 7/10 of a second separate these two. Another new fastest lap for Proctor.
Yeah, it's down again, 3 laps in a row, isn't it? So not by much, but it is creeping down again as we are, of course, getting closer to that pit window. There is Sam DeHaan in 3rd place. 4th is Collard. 5th in the background is Ian Logie. Still fascinating to see what Patrick Kujala can do in these conditions as the 2 McLarens then turn their way out of the right-hander. Now remember that the Jordan Witt car will go the way of Jack Mitchell, who is very, very quick. Lewis Proctor's car goes the way of Ollie Wilkinson. So it's going to be very interesting to see the relative pace of those in the so-called pro stint, plus Patrick Kujala with that 10-second penalty, so to speak, to make up. Sandy Mitchell will take over the 4th place car, and that's on pole for race 2, so straight away you know that's got good pace. Dean McDonald now up into 11th spot. We saw him get past or on the way with Nick Jones. You can also see with these 2 McLarens so close, and you can compare the 2 against one another, just how careful they've both got to be with the throttle because they look so twitchy and nervous at certain places.
Yeah, exactly. We're seeing particularly Jordan Witt's car on the exit of some of the tight corners, the rear end stepping out, although he's pulled a nice gap on Proctor on this lap so far. They really are flirting with disaster there when they take these wide lines through particularly Palmer's, the third corner, the first of the left-handers on the infield. They have to get so close to the edge of the road, and yes, that's the quickest way round the corner. Yes, that is where all of the grip is, but it is you're that much closer to the edge of the road. If you do misjudge it and have a moment, you are going on the grass is soaking wet, you're not going to stop, and you could end up hitting the barriers. So to find the ultimate speed, you have to take more risks in these conditions than you normally would.
And in theory, with these being the AMs, perhaps this is the stint where you don't want the risks to be taken. Let the pros do the hard yards in that second stint. We mentioned how wet the warm-up was. We lost because of an accident, Richard Neary. We also had on the very outlap, the first car out of the pit lane at turn 1, James Baldwin off into the mud, red flag. And all that was just a little bit too much throttle, a bit too soon, and the car just broke away on icy cold tyres.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be much of a mistake, really. Sometimes you don't have to make a mistake at all. If you arrive at a corner and it's just a tiny bit wetter than it was the lap before, it is very easy to get caught out and go sailing straight off. So they really are balancing on a knife edge out there at the moment. Jordan Wick doing so particularly well, though. He is the first person into the 2:08 bracket now, and the gap goes up by a second that time around. In GT4, no change in position, and actually things spreading out a little bit more at the moment. The second of those TF Sport Aston Martins, the 95 of Conor O'Brien, has shaken free from the sideways Ford Mustang of Will Moore, making his first appearance of the season in the Academy Motorsport car that has really impressed me. It had decent pace at the start of the year, but the last 2 or 3 rounds, this car has arguably been the one to beat. The pace we saw at Brands Hatch, where they got the race victory, was impressive, and even here in the wet conditions, they're keeping pace with those in front of them.
You just had a shot there of Patrick Kuyler at Round Racing getting ready for the pit window. Now, bear in mind, Snetterton doesn't have the biggest of pit lanes, and in these conditions, you're going to want your AMs out and your pros in as soon as possible. The point being that it's going to be a very crowded pit lane when the window opens. Now, although Round Racing has, of course, the extra 10 seconds to serve because of its win at Donington, it is in the last 2 garages, so it doesn't have to be hemmed in on either side. Yes, the cars have to sweep round the previous garage, but as soon as the car is released, it's into clear space. So its pit stop release ought to be easier than many of the other teams. So it might just gain a second back relative to 1 or 2 others because of its place within the pit lane. Now, here is Duncan Cameron, the Northwest-based driver, fending off Adam Ballon. And it's Ferrari ahead of Lamborghini in this sort of Auto Italia competition at the moment. So for, where are they overall? 8th and 9th, Duncan Cameron versus Adam Ballon. Now, don't forget the Lamborghini here has 7 seconds to make up in the pits because it's got the 7 seconds to serve extra from its result at Donington. And Adam Ballon is in danger of losing another position anyway because Dean McDonald's charge up from the back of the field continues. He looks for a way by. Meantime, through the infield comes the GT4 fight, and this is for 3rd, 4th and 5th in the class. Will Moore in the Mustang trying to chase down those 2 yellow highlighter pens ahead of him, the Aston Martins of TF Sport. Right, the GT3 pit window is open, and Duncan Cameron is off the road, and that leaves the door wide open for Ballon and McDonald to get up and pass. The Lamborghini gains 1 spot. The McLaren's going to try and go for 2 inside at bomb hole. Can McDonald get the power down and get through? He's got the inside line for Coram. Yes, look at that. Suddenly the traction was there. Boom, he's passed.
Brilliant driving there from Dean McDonald then, who started the lap 10th and will end it in 8th, whilst both of the Ram Racing Mercedes are in. So as you suggested, teams taking this advantage to get the cars in early. The 69 car then, Patrick Kuyler about to jump in, but a 10-second success penalty to be served. So although that was the first of the Mercedes to arrive at the pit box, it will more than likely be the last of the Mercedes to head back out onto the circuit. Witt, Proctor stayed out, so too did James Baldwin, Dean McDonald and Adam Ballon. Everybody else is in, so Ram have brought both of their cars in. Barwell have brought the 78 car in for Sandy Mitchell to take over from Rob Collard. Michael Igoe is in the WPI Motorsport Lamborghini, so too Duncan Cameron in the Ferrari, and Stuart Proctor in the McLaren, and Nick Jones in the Bentley. So 5 cars stayed out, everybody else died for the pit lane.
Now, you can understand why, can't you? If you've got a very evenly matched partnership, you might be able to keep them out for a little bit later, because also you benefit from a clearer pit lane. The GT3 and GT4 pit windows, by the way, staggered. So 22 to 32 for GT3, 28 to 38 for GT4 in the race as Jordan Wick goes through. Right now, you've got there Sandy Mitchell rejoining. So now the order will be shuffled. We'll have a look at it at the end of this next lap. 96 McLaren still hustling on Lewis Proctor. all of a sudden has lost a lot of time relative to Jordan Witt, hasn't he? So what was 1.9 seconds last time looks like it's going up and up.
Yeah, but it's not that Proctor is getting slower, it's that Witt is getting quicker. Proctor just set his personal best lap on the previous lap, which was 2/10 slower than Witt, who will, I imagine, stay out, but whether or not Proctor will do the same awaits to be seen. Yes, he will. So these two are quite happy out there at the moment, with still another few minutes left of the pit stop window. Out goes the Team Parker Racing Bentley with now the second driver, which is Scott Malvin. There we go. It's not like he's been racing with us all season or anything. Scott Malvin in the Bentley, winner at Donington Park, of course, in similar conditions. But significantly, what we did see a moment ago was coming out of the pit lane. Sandy Mitchell is now considerably further up the road and indeed ahead of now the 69 Ram Racing Mercedes. So as far as the championship leaders are concerned, that dynamic has changed now. It is now the Mercedes chasing after the Lamborghini, and as things stand, that gap is going to be a lot smaller than it was at the start of the day.
So on board the Lamborghini then, Sandy Mitchell, pole position driver for race 2 this afternoon. That road looks drier to me to an extent. Yes, it is still raining, but it's not torrential, is it? So it's going to be interesting to see what the pace of the cars is like within this second stint. As you see on the clock, 34 minutes to go. In comes Adam Ballan to give way to Phil Keane. So Barwell pit in. Again, they are hemmed in only on one side. It's the others up the pit lane that have got company on both sides. So in a race like this, you've got to get on with your neighbours. There is 72 then, serving the stop. It will drop down. And number 10, McLaren, Jordan Witt, is about to put a lap on number 51, Ferrari here, which has now, of course, served its pit stop, so it's not losing a lap on pure pace. Matt Griffin is at the wheel of the car, and there you see Jordan Witt coming up to try and forge away through the traffic. The leading gap, 1.8 seconds then, as we work lap 11 here with 34 minutes to go.
Yeah, 4 cars then yet to stop in GT3. Of course, the entirety of the GT4 field waiting for their pit window to open, which will happen imminently. Lewis Proctor didn't quite take the right line there through Brundle and Nelson, and I do suspect we might well see that orange McLaren dive for the pit lane this time around. Well, Jordan Witt will no doubt be casting his mind back to Alton Park now, won't he? That very first race of the season when this car was in the lead. It got to the pit stop portion of the race, and sadly it was handed a penalty after the pit stops, and they lost the opportunity to start the season with a victory. Maybe here at Snetterton in another 1 hour sprint race they have a chance to make amends for that. In comes Lewis Proctor then. So this is the second place Optimum Motorsport McLaren heading into the pit lane, and it will be Ollie Wilkinson, who has made the transition out of Optimum indeed from Aston Martin to McLaren this year, who will jump in for the second stint.
So there, the car 45 degrees, nose in for the pit stops. Again, to save space with everybody coming in, you can't have the cars nose to tail. So Lewis Proctor bails, in gets Ollie Wilkinson, and the gap had been hovering about the 1.8 second margin. Jordan Witt, fastest lap of the race, but as I say, now that you've got the real guns for hire in many of the other cars, is the road drier, is it quicker, and are we going to have better lap times? How is that going to shuffle the order? Door closed, car to drop down. Pit stop time, of course, 70 seconds, irrespective of your pit stop successes. Next McLaren in from 2Cs is number 9. So Dean McDonald started from the pits, finishes his stint in the pits, and will give way then now in that car to the impressive Angus Fender. And as one McLaren is in, the other is set to go. Jordan Witt, of course, coming in on a different lap so that 2Cs hasn't got both cars in the pits at the same time. Now, all of this suggests then that the next car to watch is going to be partly 78 Sandy Mitchell, but still 69 Patrick Kujala is in contention with that car. So the Ram Racing Mercedes is still, I think, worth watching.
And on the previous lap was 2 seconds quicker than Sandy Mitchell in front, and that is the championship battle going on. There is Mitchell coming out of the final corner. They are in traffic, though, which perhaps explains this. And behind the 69 car is now the number 60 Calvin Fletcher, who could be the real driver to focus on in this stint. He is the highest placed of the pro drivers amongst the sea of silver graded drivers who had the early advantage against the AMs in the Pro-Am combos. But now Yalma Berman in the wet, in a Mercedes, he could have a real chance of fighting for a podium.
Another one that stayed out, interestingly, is James Baldwin. So you've got Witt from Baldwin, 20 seconds between them, and yet to stop. And then we'll keep an eye to the best of the stoppers. It's Sandy Mitchell from Patrick Kujala at the moment, I think I'm right in saying, depending on where the Ollie Wilkinson McLaren is going to drop into. Now, the GT4 pit window is, as you see, open because TF Sport has gone to work with both cars, interestingly. 2Cs there, waiting for the race leader. So the board is for number 10. That is Jordan Witt. In he comes then. So really, really good stint by Jordan Witt. That didn't put a wheel wrong, and he's done the fastest lap. tempted to say that's the best I've ever seen Jordan drive, and it could be a very important stint as they're threading himself into the car. Is Jack Mitchell ready for the second stint? Here is GT4 versus GT3 as Sandy Mitchell comes up to try and negotiate number 57 McLaren, which is Gus Bowers, puts a lap on him, goes through. So this is Sandy Mitchell, of course, storming back after the pit stop for that car.
Yeah, indeed, goes past the second place GT4 car, then on board with Sandy Mitchell, who on the previous lap, one of the lap times like he more or less matched Patrick Kuehler on the previous lap, so the gap is still stable at about 3 3/4 seconds between these two. And whilst it's probably not going to become the fight for the lead after the pit stops, it should be still the fight for second or third. Down into Brundle and Nelson he goes, as out of the pit lane now goes the number 10 McLaren. So Jordan Whitness handed over to Jack Mitchell. And this, the fight between the Ram Racing teammates. Now, this is a tricky situation for Ram Racing because clearly the 6 car is quicker. It's the pro driver, Jelmer Bourbon. They could have a chance of winning the race if he gets past his teammate quickly, but his teammate needs the championship points. What do they do? Sam
DeHaan, Ian Logie, the AMs have done their stints, but they're both paying customers, aren't they? So in that respect, you could argue it's every man for himself, but it does have the potential to be a really great battle, this Jelmer Bourbon versus Patrick Kuehler, as there, Sandy Mitchell still working his way through the GT4 cars, comes up over the timing line. For the moment then, it is Kuehler just ahead, heading now over the line. Michael O'Brien just comes out of the pit lane, but he's going to keep the position as he now loses one to Kuehler. He might split the Mercedes though, there, yes he does. Bourbon right round the outside, wheel to wheel on the outlap is the McLaren. Already into a rhythm is Jelmer Bourbon. He makes the place his as they make the run up now towards the Wilson hairpin. So the McLarens keep track position over number 2 McLaren here.
Yeah, that was really important, wasn't it, that number 2 McLaren did not get in front of the 69 Mercedes, not only for championship points, but also because that would have definitely held up Patrick Kuehler in the 69 car, who actually was the big winner out of all that. He's pulled a few car lengths over Jelmer Bourbon, dives up the inside now of the 95 Aston Martin, fresh out of the pit lane, now with Patrick Kibble on board for the second stint. Still wait to see how the GT4 field is shaken out after the pit stop, for the success penalties to be served there, as well as Kuehler under pressure from Bourbon, but that isn't really an overtaking opportunity.
Interestingly, the fastest lap of the race now done by Andrea Calderelli. He's taken over the 9th placed, provisionally, Lamborghini from Michael Igo, and that means he's gone 4 tenths quicker than Jordan Wick did in the first stint. The Mercedes fight is still, as you can see, well and truly joined. The lights flashing. Jelmer Bourbon runs out of road. He was so busy on the lights coming to Bentley Straight, he's run out of road, loses time, loses a place to the traffic, but he's significantly about to get mugged here by Michael O'Brien. So Jelmer Bourbon, so busy was he trying to find a way past his teammate that he's dropped it, lost a position potentially. Here is Jack Mitchell. He's about to come up to break the beam at the end of the lap. Has he kept the race lead? Yes, he has, because there, look, the Optimum McLaren still behind in second place. If it is Mitchell from Wilkinson, it is 10 from 96 as it was in the first stint of the race. And these two, with a greater gap between them now, go over the timing line 2.7 seconds apart. But where is the opposition? Sandy Mitchell should be next, but how much time has he got to make up, and can he make it up relative to the pace of the McLarens that have looked so strong already? There is number 78 then, so the Barwell Lamborghini, which is one off of the shoe-in for the win round here, goes through in 3rd place. Mitchell is 19 seconds back from the 2nd placed McLaren. He is lapping quicker than the 2 ahead of him, mind you, and there you just saw Andrea Calderelli go over the line. 4th is Kuehler. 5th was Jordan Collard in the HMC McLaren. Ignore him because he's going to make a pit stop. He's losing position to Jelmer Bourbon, who now goes 5th. Effectively, Michael O'Brien is 6th, and Andrea Calderelli is in 7th place. Calderelli is flying.
Yes, he is, but has a lot of work to do because Michael Igo at the end of his stint was quite deep in the field. Academy Motorsport here in the Ford Mustang, they have gained out of this pit stop shuffle, haven't they? They're ahead now of the 57 McLaren, which has just come out of the pit lane with Gus Bowers. No, sorry, it hasn't pitted yet, excuse me. So Gus Bowers is still yet to make his mandatory pit stop, and actually wouldn't quite like it if the Ford Mustang, which is now a lap behind him, would get out of the way. But the Mustang does appear to have gained time relative to some of those around them.
Yeah, even though that had to make up, or sorry, had to serve an extra 7 seconds in the pit lane. Yeah, so they're on different laps, these two, but it's an important battle. The McLaren wants to be ahead of the Mustang because it will need to be there for when it serves its stop. And Gus Bowers runs Matt Cowley up the curb, and Matt says, no, I'm going to stand my ground here because I want the inside line for another corner. Can't do it, switches sides. Everywhere he goes, the McLaren is in the way, but as we say, this is an important fight for after the pit stops to keep that McLaren in contention. Phil Keane at the wheel of number 72 2 has now done the fastest lap of the race. So, interesting, Calderelli, then Keane. Different teams admittedly, but the same brand. Lamborghini, now with 25 minutes to go, looking as though it has become the quickest type of car out there.
Yes, well, Phil Keane in a Lamborghini around Snetterton, wet or dry, is always going to be on the pace, isn't he? The trouble is, again, after that spin that Ballon had, he's digging himself out of a hole. This is so often the position that we seem to find Phil Keane in this year. Remember back to Brands Hatch when Ballon handed over to Phil Keane a lap down from the race leaders. 3.4 seconds then separate Jack Mitchell and Ollie Wilkinson at the front of the field. This is the third place man, Sandy Mitchell. And you know what? I think actually Barwell will be pretty happy with this. Yes, they are 21 seconds away from the race leader, but they're ahead of those they need to be ahead of. And look, there is every chance that the 69 Mercedes could lose more positions here. Championship-wise, Barwell, I think, will be pretty pleased with this.
Yeah, Yama Berman is still all over the back of Patrick Kuyler as they go into Riches. So it's interesting, the pace of Berman. Remember, he was off the road a couple of laps back. He has regrouped and he's caught back up to Kuyler. So all the time he'd lost, he's found again. That suggests this is the quicker car, and perhaps were it to get past, and this might be the move, it could get away. Let's see. Berman on the tighter line, Kuyler on the grippier outside line that will translate to the inside for turn 3. But no, Berman has done it. Round the outside, the Flying Dutchman picks up a place. Jelmer Berman goes through, then ahead of Patrick Kuyler. Now, he was half a minute behind the race leader. It's a big ask, but you never know. If we were to have a race interruption, suddenly things would change. So Berman, for Ian Logie, the AM who pays the bills, who did the first stint, gets up past the championship leaders, Sander Hahn and Patrick Kuyler. And now, look, he's away.
Yes, significantly, he's about 8 seconds behind Sandy Mitchell in the third place Lamborghini. Significant because it would be a podium place, also significant because of the championship situation. So Jelmer Berman has been released now from behind his teammate, and now might be able to do his teammate a little bit of a favour. The final GT4 car, by the way, is in the pit lane. That's because Bauer's handing over the HHC Mclaren, as there is a swap there, as Andrea Calderelli takes 6th place now away from Michael O'Brien. Calderelli is only about 5 seconds or so behind the Mercedes squabble, and he's made that move stick nicely. Calderelli is flying.
It's interesting, this, isn't it? Because Calderelli, another new circuit, but if you're a pro, you're a pro. You get parachuted into the car, the team, the venue, and you just learn. And we saw this at Donington. He said after practice, I just can't get bits of it right, and he won the race. And here he is again, learning about a new venue. I don't think it's going to be a win, certainly not in this one, but he had already done a fastest lap of the race. The second time for good, he's pouring back places. Andrea Calderelli, the only Italian to have won in British GT, and accelerating then now up towards the GT4 traffic. 97 is ahead. That's now Jamie Caroline, F4 champion of years past, and there behind is Michael O'Brien. So the leading gap, 4 seconds. Fastest lap now is Jack Mitchell, so the race leader is getting away. The lead gap is extending as Calderelli has got a bit stuck in the traffic here. Does that mean that Michael O'Brien can come back at him? No, I don't think so, because now look, the Lamborghini is able to find the room, get the grip as well, and storm past the traffic. And
coming out of the pit lane just in front, or just alongside this lot, look, there is the 57 McLaren. So that is significant for GT4 positions. 57 is behind 97. Chris Westmail behind Jamie Caroline. Again, significant for the GT4 championship. We'll give that another lap before we get the timing screen resets itself, and then we'll start running you through the GT4 order. But Calderelli there manages to clear that traffic. Calderelli and Mike Ligo could be a good shout for race 2 honours. You know, they're starting 4th on the grid for that race, and based on the speed that Calderelli has in this stint, he'll be starting the race, of course, in race 2. Maybe they could become our first double winners of the year.
Possibly so. As there you see 61 now, Matt Cowley at the wheel, having taken over the Academy Motorsport Ford Mustang in GT4. Yeah, Michael Igo, he's had, 4 different co-drivers over the course of the previous 6 races. Jack Mitchell, though, leading outright, yet to score a win this year. Another fastest lap by Phil Keane. That's the GT4 leader into the pit lane then. So Jordan Collard giving way to Patrick Mathieson for HHC. A very quiet and calm pit lane, so no traffic around to get hemmed in. How is number 9 doing? Angus Fender up into 8th place now. That's going to be 7th place, given that the car of Collard is now pitted. So in real terms, it's another position gain. The one that he's chasing after is Phil Keane, but that, I'm afraid, is a place that he's now lost, because Keane has got better pace and moved himself up past number 9. So you gain some by pit stops, you lose some, and Angus Fender fighting the car for traction once more behind him. You'll see Joe Osborne there, who has taken over 36 from Stuart Proctor. So that car lost time early on. It puts the pressure on the gun driver, doesn't it, the pro, in this second stint.
Yeah, Stuart, father of Lewis Proctor, of course, who was in the mix in the GT4 category. Phil Keane's previous lap was 4 seconds quicker than Angus Fender in front of him. That is the speed that Phil Keane is able to run at. And in fairness to Joe Osborne, he was only a couple of seconds slower than that. Joe in the 36 Balf Motorsport McLaren, making, I believe, their final appearance of the season in British GT. And Joe Osborne, one of the stars of the show at Donington earlier this year, in slightly sketchy conditions, albeit on slick tyres on a slightly damp and drying circuit. He is currently running in 10th position though, and the adventure, there's at least one more place to be gained out of all of this.
Now they're coming back into the race, look, is the number 58 McLaren, which loses its class lead, so through ahead will have gone Chris Westmail car, but also that was behind Jamie Caroline, so that's going to put that team down to third. But don't forget they had an extra 10 seconds to serve within the pit stop. So GT4, looking at where they all came out back on track, is going to be very competitive before the end. Patrick Kimball's had a moment as well, just regrouping there in the Aston Martin. He's about to lose track position. He gets dived on by Angus Fender, goes through on the inside line, and that rather forced Patrick Kimball out even wider. Overall leading gap now is 3.8 seconds. But it's going to be interesting now with 1.7, give or take, the margin in GT4 as to who comes out on top, whether it's TF Sport or HHC Motorsport. And the Academy Mustang, 7 seconds delayed with its success penalty in the pits, also playing catch-up here. Now, 20 minutes to go. Up front, though, Jack Mitchell and Jordan Witt looking as though they're going to maintain this 100% record of a different winner in GT3 every time out.
And even if Ollie Wilkinson can catch and overtake them, they haven't won yet either, and they have the optimum car. So, and indeed he was quicker by about 3/10 on the previous lap, but Jack Mitchell just managing this, is he? Although that looks as though maybe to the eye it's come down again on this lap. Yeah, definitely middle sector 4/10 quicker for Wilkinson. At the end of the lap, then it's 2 minutes 8.2 for the leader, 2 minutes 7.9 for Wilkinson, 3.5 seconds now the margin. If he can keep that up for the remaining 19 minutes of the race, he might be able to get there. But Jack Mitchell definitely has the track position advantage. Sandy Mitchell comes through in third, and he is more or less exactly matching the leaders. Remember I said at the start of his stint he was 21 seconds behind the leader. Well, he's now 20.8 seconds behind the leader, so lap times almost identical.
And significantly for the championship, this car is ahead of the team that's ahead on points, namely Dahan and Kuila. So even if it's not going to be a race win, another good haul of points, and to narrow that deficit within the championship with only 2 races to go would still be a good outcome.
Yelmer Berman, by the way, in 4th place, new fastest lap, nearly a second quicker than Mitchell, 6.2 seconds the margin now.
And that means 1.8 seconds quicker than the best of the first stint of Jordan Witt, as the road does start to dry a little. There going through is Angus Fender, getting through the GT4 traffic, but taking Joe Osborne with him, so he might lose another spot here very shortly. Angus Fender, relatively inexperienced driver compared to Joe, who runs a little bit deep going into Riches, but gets the car back under control, powers out of the corner. Now in GT4, Jamie Caroline is 8 seconds clear of Patrick Mathieson after the pit stop, so it is advantage TF Sport because of the extra time that HHC had to serve in the pits for 58.
And specifically advantage 97, because the 95 car with whom they are tied for the championship lead is only 4th in class. Patrick Kimball, then, the one that has some work to do now in the final quarter or so of the race to at least try and salvage a podium out of this. HHC are not going to make that easy for him, though. He's made 2, as we've said. As indeed most of the GT4 field appears to be. They are also in the championship fight, so that is going to be a really interesting battle. The gaps are not huge actually between 2nd, 3rd and 4th in GT4, so that could develop quite nicely, I think, over the remaining part of the race.
So the race with 17 minutes to go has number 10 McLaren in the race lead. This battle you're looking at between the sister car off the road, Angus Fender. He was in 9th place, but not anymore because he's gone gardening, and that means that Joe Osborne goes through, and Angus Fender's McLaren then gets towards the road. Is he going to lose any other places in GT3? No, it's not for the moment. The GT4 McLarens scamper by. Mathieson and Westmail go through, with Patrick Mathieson, remember, still trying to close that gap down to Jamie Caroline. So this was how it all happened, just slightly too rapid into the corner, slightly offline. And don't fight the car, just let it go, because the more you fight it, the more it's going to break grip and you have a bigger moment. So Angus Fender letting it run, gets it back under control, gets back on the road, loses a place, loses time to the similar car of Joe Osborne. Fastest lap, as Andy said, still that of Yelmer Berman. 16 minutes of the race to go. Lead gap has gone up once more by about 9/10 of a second. That's up to 4.4. It was a slow lap last time, Wilkinson, relative to Mitchell. Jack Mitchell getting his head down and storming on, but still lapping in the sixes is Jelmer Berman, who is therefore closing on Sandy Mitchell for third place.
That is significant. So too is the fact that Andrea Calderelli is now only just over 2 seconds behind Patrick Cuéllar. So yes, there is a chance that Barwell could lose some more points in this, but also so could the 69 Ram racing car. In GT4, meanwhile, this is the fight for second place. Patrick Mathiasen in the 58 HHC McLaren, only a second now ahead of Chris Westmail, his teammate, as off goes the number 9 car. Again, that's Angus Fender for the second time in less than a lap. This is what I was saying earlier on, though. To find the grip, you have to go so close to the edge of the road, and that means if you do misjudge it, you are likely to go off the road completely.
And also, having been off the road, your tyres are dirty, which are therefore going to give you less grip. Coming to the end of a 1 hour race anyway, and so the cars here, second and third. The gap, by the way, is widening between the top two. So Jamie Caroline is now 10 seconds clear. It was 8, he's now 10, so he's pulling away from the McLaren. So although they look good in the first stint, now Patrick Mathiasen and indeed Chris Westmail behind are not being able to bring down the gap relative to Jamie Caroline, who's on target seemingly for another victory within the GT4 class.
Yes, and that would be, remarkably, their third victory of the year in this season where no one seems able to repeat victories in either class. The 97 car in GT4 really has been able to score well. The trouble is they've had a couple of slightly disappointing results. No points scored at all after a DNF in the second race at Alton Park. They had that contact with their teammates at Brands Hatch, for which they were penalised. So although they have more wins than anyone else in GT4, they are still only narrowly ahead in the championship. Only narrowly ahead in the fight for second place, though, is Patrick Mathiasen. Chris Westmail, who won at Donington, remember, on his birthday earlier on this year. Both of these cars, in fact, now have one race victory to their name. And at the moment, they're fighting over a very important fourth place. It's the 57 car that could do with the points, really. They're that little bit further back in the championship, but perhaps for that reason, it might be beneficial if Mathiasen hangs on, because arguably, the 58 car is that team's best shot at the championship. There is Calderelli, the gap to Patrick Cuéllar, 1.6 seconds. There you can see it visually. This is significant. Cuéllar cannot really afford to lose any more places here, especially if Sandy Mitchell is able to hang on to that third position, which for the time being he's doing a good job of. This will be a fascinating battle, David.
It's weird that Cuéllar is losing the time when you compare the pace of that car to the one in the hands of Jelmer Berman. Ran out of the same stable. Berman, remember, caught, dropped back, caught up, passed, pulled away. Cuéllar dropping into the clutches, as you say here, of Calderelli. So he doesn't seem to have anything by way of a response, does he? Calderelli is still charging forward, but Patrick Cuéllar's pace is slightly curious out of all of this as we work now the last 13 minutes of the race. But yeah, the way that Calderelli comes up onto his tail suggests that he's going to be able to get past him pretty easily.
Yeah, worth mentioning that Cuéllar is graded as a silver driver, whereas Berman and Calderelli are out-and-out pros, but there is a discussion to be had there, I think, because Cuéllar is clearly a very rapid and these days quite experienced driver, so yes, he is a silver-graded driver, but yes, you're quite right, you wouldn't expect him to have lost 10 seconds to Jelmer Berman in about 10 minutes, but right now his focus very much is directed towards his rear-view mirror as Andrea Calderelli in the Donington race-winning WPI Motorsport Lamborghini slides its way through Gorham. Did he save that slide? Yes, he did, but that was very sideways as he came off the throttle and onto the brakes into Murray's corner. Across the line they go. This fight for fifth position is about to ignite.
Also, just to clarify, we were getting our TFs confused in the context of Jamie Caroline and Dan Paul. They have yet to win, in fact. It's 2 wins for the 95 sister car for TF Sport. So they've got up into that joint championship lead, not by stealth necessarily, but by just good, consistent racecraft. But this could be a maiden victory for them. Strange to think they haven't had a win, given how the wins have been shared around within GT4. But that's going to be a potential maiden win for number 9. Back to Cuéllar's Mercedes. Andrea Calderelli then running in 6th place, was 11th. We saw Nick Jones off the road earlier on, and the Bentley has gained a place at the expense of Matt Griffin, who is still struggling in these conditions in the Ferrari. Now this, the fight between for 5th and 6th, Patrick Cuéllar and Andrea Calderelli, as the cars make the run down now to the Brundle-Nelson sequence. Can the Lamborghini find a way through on the inside line? Not there in car, but Patrick Cuéllar hanging on the position through the left, through the right, back onto power now. Cuéllar hanging on a 5th. He's got to fight for every place here, every point, not necessarily just for him, but of course for Sam de Haan. And although it might be that Berman can take points away from Mitchell, Cuéllar cannot afford to give any away to Calderelli.
Yeah, they can't bank on the fact that their rivals are going to lose points here, and of course the next car behind them is the number 2 car, which, okay, it's not going to catch them, but at the moment they're taking good points out of the Jensen Team Rocket RJN squad, who are also up there 4th place in the points. The other car that's right at the sharp end in the points is the 72 Lamborghini of Phil Keane and Adam Ballon, and Keane is almost with O'Brien now for 7th place. 7th is, I think, as good as it will get for the 72 car, certainly a far cry from the wonderful results they had here a year ago, but not a bad salvage job after Ballon's spin.
They are lapping quicker, though, than Michael O'Brien ahead, so there's one. I reckon there's one place possible for Phil Keane. There, Calderelli up the inside, is there contact? Oh, so nearly. Calderelli had to really back out of that as Cuéllar chopped across the front and in the traffic as well. The headlights to warn the BMW to get out of the way. Adam Hatfield does just that as Calderelli goes around the outside of him. But that could have really ended in tears, couldn't it, for Cuéllar and Calderelli there. So they escape the drama. But yes, just to go back to Michael O'Brien being caught by Phil Keane, that gap is 0.6 of a second, and much quicker is Keane, to the tune of 3 seconds a lap than the McLaren. So there's going to be one place to gain for Phil Keane, but Calderelli has certainly not given up, as there is the race leading car of Jack Mitchell. 9 minutes on the clock now into Brundle and Nelson through the S's. He's put another lap there on Ben Tuck's SRO Motorsport BMW. 7th, that is, in GT4, but Jack Mitchell doing a really good job here. But Calderelli has not given up then, the brains behind the FFF racing team in international GT racing here, brought into the WPI squad and going after Cuéllar. What is it, 3 lengths between them?
Yeah, Cuéllar took the wider line there, though, didn't he, out through the right-hander at Williams onto the Bentley straight. So that just affords him a little bit more straight line speed going down the back straight into Brundle and Nelson. So the Mercedes stays ahead. The Lamborghini much more nimble, much more agile through the tight technical stuff. That's all well and good, but if you're not close enough to attack going into the tight technical stuff, it can be quite hard to overtake a car that's quicker than you in a straight line. It's one of the great fascinations of GT3 competition. As off has gone the 61 car of Matt Cowley. Now, I noticed out of the window when they flashed past at the start of this lap, he was under serious pressure from Ewan Hankey in the Balf Motorsport McLaren. Ewan has gone through, so too significantly as Sam Smelt in the Toyota. 2 places lost there for Matt Cowley.
An incident involving these 2 cars is under investigation, which can only be the one at Wilson. Not entirely sure it was anybody's fault necessarily, just 2 drivers going for the same bit of real estate, each equally determined to gain the position, or keep the position in Cuéllar's case. The gap between them is 0.6 of a second, 7 3/4 minutes to go. Let's have a look back from Cuéllar's car. Where in all of this is the Lamborghini? If there wasn't contact, it was very, very close, and certainly something flies, doesn't it, from behind? But they're going to have a look at that in race control and see if anybody has a case to answer. Down they head now into the turn 3 left-hander. Cuéllar staying ahead. Up front, though, it is 5.8 seconds. Mitchell to Wilkinson, and Calderelli, who is a real master of that Lamborghini, is throwing everything and getting past the Mercedes ahead of him.
Phil Keane, by the way, ahead of Michael O'Brien. Now you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, and already 3 seconds up the road from him as well. So that is 7th place in the bag now for Barwell's 72 Lamborghini. WPI's number 18 example, still trying to get past this big Mercedes of Patrick Cuéllar, who is doing everything right, in fairness. Given how quickly Calderelli caught him, I did kind of think that this was going to be a slightly easier overtake for the Lamborghini man. It has not been. Cuéllar is defending as if his life, and indeed championship, depends on it, and he so far has kept the red Lamborghini at bay. What of Berman to Mitchell? 3.3 seconds now between the 3rd and 4th place cars. So again, I'm not sure Jelmer Berman is quite going to have time to get there. In the spray, down the Bentley straight, and Cuéllar running on the wetter side of the road there. There's no danger of a dry line forming here, but there is definitely a drier and wetter side of the road, and it could be that they're just having to start thinking about cooling those wet tyres down. No further action, you'll be glad to hear, regarding that incident between the two of them, so the race can continue.
Good, because I wasn't really sure what they're going to look at there. I mean, it was close, but there was certainly no malice, I wouldn't have thought, on anybody's part. Calderelli thought there was a gap and went for it, and Kuyler closed the door. So we have got people being warned about track limits, and in fact it's 95 Patrick Kibble. Track limits were certainly a talking point in qualifying yesterday, as Kuyler again under braking is caught by Calderelli up now towards the completion of the lap. There is the HHC into Nissan fight, because you've got second and third, Mattison and Chris Wesmail, but they're both being caught by Patrick Kibble. So second, third and fourth, TF Sport away and gone, courtesy of Jamie Caroline, but then HHC second and third, TF Sport fourth, 5 minutes 40 seconds and counting on the clock, and still Kuyler is ahead of Calderelli. The gap was 0.3 of a second when they crossed the line, but Andrea Calderelli, is he running out of options now?
Well, yeah, the tricky thing is that to overtake, you're going to have to go off that grippier line, and it's just so hard. He can get alongside quite easily into places like Wilson or Agostini, for example, but then the traction off the corner is with the car that took the wider line, and that, for the most part, appears to be the Mercedes. So Kuyler is, as I said, not putting a foot wrong here. Calderelli is closer this time into Agostini and goes to the outside. So this is interesting to see what the exit speeds are like. Kuyler will try to box him in on the exit, but Calderelli might have his nose on the inside. Oh, he's got more speed out of the corner, but Hamilton is not a corner you want to run side by side through. Kuyler moves to the left-hand side, defends the position, but Calderelli is starting to look a bit more urgent now, isn't he? Again, almost pushing the Mercedes into Oggies. Kuyler on the tight line, drifts out wide, too wide, off onto the runoff area. Calderelli's got the inside this time and will finally break through.
No, he
will he? Kuyler fights back on the outside, gets the traction and holds on to the place.
Exactly, he knew what was coming, so he stood on the outside line waiting for the grip level to come back to him and powered out the other side. So great driving by Kuyler there. Very cleverly done, stood his ground. Calderelli threw everything at it, but it did not work. So Patrick Kuyler hangs on to 5th place, down through the S's they come, 4 minutes on the clock. It might only be for 5th place, but it's as good a battle as anything, this, isn't it? Calderelli versus Kuyler, two real GT3 stars. That was Calderelli's best chance yet. Meantime, in GT4, it is still just Mattison ahead of Chris Wesmail, but while they're squabbling here, and Mattison's pace has just disappeared, he's been caught by his teammate, and they're both being caught now by 95, so 58 has become the cork in the bottle here, holding up the sister car, and that brings Patrick Kibble into the mix. He's about to have a go on the inside line, down to Agostini, is here. Chris Wesmail going to be able to defend, let's see, they break, they turn in, up the inside line goes Kibble, Wesmail runs out of road, and up to 3rd in class goes the Aston Martin.
And every chance here, I think, that Kibble could do the double and get past the other HHC car, because as you said, Mattison is the one that seems to be struggling, and Kibble really could do with the points with his teammate out in the race lead, looking good for the first victory of the year then for the 97 TF car of Dan Vaughan and Jamie Caroline. They're 13 seconds clear of this bunch, but remember, they are tied for the championship lead with that car, the 95 Aston Martin. Kibble therefore really needs to try and get into 2nd place. In the back of his mind, though, he might be considering that success penalty now for race 2. That overtake he just made was worth a few extra points, but also worth an extra 5 seconds in the pit lane in race 2. Of course, their teammate, they will have the full 10 seconds for winning the race if they hang on for the remaining 3 minutes.
So could it be advantage HHC later on in the day on the pit stops? Let's see. 3 minutes to go here at Snetterton. Fastest lap again, Phil Keen. We're into the 5s now, and off the road.
Mattison. Yes, but no, Wesmail, excuse me, Wesmail, the other one, 57. So
he lost out anyway to the Patrick Kibble Aston Martin, and so 57 off the road, losing more time out of all of this, as again Calderelli is attacked on the infield, and again Kuyler stands his ground on the outside line. We've been here before, thinks Andrea Calderelli. Kuyler stays ahead of him then, still for 5th place. He's going to go down to the wire, this, isn't it? So in GT4, Jamie Caroline leads from Patrick Mattison, then Patrick Kibble. It's all changing around there. In GT3, Jack Mitchell looks secure up front to give us yet another different winner, but that off the road is number 9, the sister car of Angus Fender, at least his 3rd incident of the race. Back on track he gets. Well, it's not your day, is it?
No, he lost a place there as well. Scott Mulvin into the top 10 now for Team Parker Racing.
Phil Keen, I mentioned, has done the fastest lap. He's gone purple in both sectors that he's achieved on this lap thus far. So proof that the road is getting quicker all the time. Kuyler deep there, coming out of the old Russell sequence of corners, heading up towards the line. But right on his tail, Andrea Calderelli heads to the timing line. Now, has he got the momentum? And off the road again is Chris Wesmail. He's got the Angus Fender GPS system in that car now. Fender going off in the GT3 McLaren. This is for second in GT4. Patrick Kibble comes out to have a go now at Patrick Mathieson. And is he going to be able to find a way through? Not there, he's not. But with a minute change on the clock, TF Sport could be on for a 1-2 in the category here.
Yeah, this will be the final lap, by the way. The leader, Jack Mitchell, went through with just under 2 minutes to go, and they're lapping in the, well, 2 minutes 7 last time. The lap times have suddenly really dropped, haven't they, by about 2 or 3 seconds. Kibble attacking, trying to get this second place away from Patrick Mathieson, who has not been as quick as the cars around him in this stint, but has so far not made a mistake. Takes a very wide line through Williams onto the Bentley straight, and Kibble drops back a car length or so. In traffic, Calderelli has one more chance to try and get 5th place away from Patrick Kuyela. The Century Motorsport BMW, which way does it go? Looks like they're going to the inside of it into Hamilton. That will massively compromise the Mercedes, and Calderelli will have the speed off the corner, goes to the outside line. That is where the grip will be through Oggies. He's later on the brakes. The BMW is still trying to decide which way it wants to go. Calderelli from the outside to the inside gets the power down. There's contact between the Mercedes and the Lamborghini, and somehow still Patrick Kuyela is in 5th place. I have no idea how he's keeping Calderelli behind, but that might have been Andrea's last opportunity.
There was just nowhere to go, was there? There was the BMW on one side and Mercedes on the other. There just was not enough real estate. So Andrea Calderelli is still stuck. The Speedworks Toyota goes into the S's. The Mercedes also is better in a straight line. It's through the twiddly bits where the Lamborghini has the advantage. So that, I think, possibly was the last chance. Checkered flag is in the ready. It is going to be a first win of the year for Jordan Witt and Jack Mitchell for 2C's Motorsport. McLaren wins in the wet at Snet. Over the line goes number 10, McLaren. Jack Mitchell wins. And there on the line for second place, Sandy Mitchell gets ahead of Ollie Wilkinson, or does he? No, says the timing screen, because by 19 thousandths Ollie Wilkinson takes the place, but to the eye it looked like the Lamborghini was ahead. So let's have another look at that if we can post-race. 4th over the line, Jelmer Berman, but something very wrong happened for the McLaren on the last lap, seemingly to lose it a big chunk of time. The rest come pouring over the line, so we've got Berman through in 4th place, 5th Kuyela, 6th Calderelli, the gap 0.3 of a second. In GT4, it is still Jamie Caroline clear, and it's a big margin, so he's on target to win the class. The timing screen has changed. Sandy Mitchell is given second position outright, as the eye said. Here is second in GT4. To the inside line goes Kibble. He couldn't find a way by. And so number 58 McLaren here. Patrick Mathieson fighting for second position in the class then. They come now up towards the approach to Bentley Straight. But yes, it was a virtual dead heat between Ollie Wilkinson and Sandy Mitchell. And Sandy was, on corrected times, given it by 81 thousandths of a second. So Sandy Mitchell's second, significant for the championship, with Dehaan and Kuyela in 5th place. Here though for GT4, and this is for second within the category, Patrick Mathieson staying ahead of Patrick Kibble and has now shaken him off by a couple of lengths through the infield. The class looks like it is going to be won by Jamie Caroline. That over the line is Scott Malvern in the Bentley, coming home in 10th place. Back to GT4. Second is still Patrick Mathieson. Kibble crawling all over the back of him, but to no avail. You're running out of opportunities now, as there 97 is on target for its maiden win of the season. Surprisingly, the wipers still busy working as Jamie Caroline sprints up towards the timing line. So a good opening stint by Dan Vaughan, and Jamie Caroline getting away from the class opposition comes through now to take the checkered flag, and he scores the first win for the number 97 TF Sport Aston Martin this year. In the background you can see second and third coming through the last corner, and it is going to be Patrick Mathieson to stay ahead of Patrick Kibble, but only just. The McLaren for HHC sandwiched between the Aston Martins. This will put Vaughan and Caroline into the championship lead, but good points nonetheless for Patrick Mathieson and Jordan Collard, who takes second in GT4, third in GT4 Patrick Kibble and Conor O'Brien. But a great effort by Jordan Witt and Jack Mitchell. People are saying that McLarens aren't necessarily the cars to have in the wet. Well, Jordan Witt, an outstanding opening stint, really was, under the pressure, in the worst of the weather, didn't put a wheel wrong, and Jack Mitchell, again, completely error-free, maintains the gap. But what went on for Ollie Wilkinson over those last few laps, because the time he got in hand over Sandy Mitchell just disappeared.
Well, at the start of the stint, Mitchell was 20 seconds behind. He finished the race just under 8 seconds behind, so yeah, big time loss there.
Jordan Witt and Jack Mitchell, the winners of round 7 of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship, from Sandy Mitchell and Rob Collard. Sandy taking the place on the line from Ollie Wilkinson and Lewis Proctor. 4th, Jelmer Berman and Ian Loggie, ahead of Patrick Kuyela and Sam Dehaan. Andrea Calderelli and Michael Igoe 6th from Phil Keane and Adam Ballon. Michael O'Brien and James Baldwin 8th from Stuart Proctor and Joe Osborne, with the top 10 rounded out by Scott Malvern and Nick Jones. GT4 victory comes 13th overall for Dan Vaughan and Jamie Caroline, ahead of Patrick Mathieson and Jordan Collard, with Conor O'Brien and Patrick Kibble taking third in the class. Fourth goes the way of Chris Wesmail and Gus Bowes, ahead of Ewan Hankey and Mia Fluitt. The Toyota coming home next, Sam Smelt and James Kell. But Matt Cowley, and we saw that car having an off the Mustang late race, ending up 19th, way down in GT4, sadly. About ahead of the two BMWs, struggling for grunt seemingly around Snetterton. Well, considering that number 10 McLaren rather dominated that race, a lot went on, didn't it? There were great battles up and down the field, but a really impressive drive. We know how good Jack Mitchell is, but Jordan Witt on occasions can be a little bit energetic in his driving, dare one say. But say it again, that first stint, probably the best we've ever seen from Jordan. Didn't put a wheel wrong, and also, don't forget, did do the fastest lap of anybody in that stint.
Yes, he did, and that is great news for them and 2C's Motorsport as well. And that is a season of frustration, I think, starting to finally all look worth it for Jordan and Jack. 2C's Motorsport, relatively new team to racing, full stop, certainly to this championship, and so that's their first ever British GT race victory. And as I said, it could arguably have come right at the very start of the year, but 7 different winners in GT3 from 7 races this year, and again, still a good chance that we could get that 8th different winner in race number 2 later on. Championship wise, by the way, provisionally, and I use the word provisionally anytime maths are involved with me, because numbers are not my strongest subject, but I reckon 1 point in it now between Ram Racing and Barwell. Ram keep the points lead, and they will now have the pit stop advantage in race 2 because they are off the podium, whereas Barwell, that late move that Sandy Mitchell made to take second place, it was so worth it for the points, but that's an extra 3 seconds now in the pit stops, a 7-second pit stop penalty now in race 2 that they will have to serve. It's going to keep twisting and turning, but we do now know it will go down to the Silverstone Showdown. It cannot be won this afternoon at Snetterton.
Am I right in saying as well that's Jack Mitchell and Jordan Witt's first overall win in British GT? So it's yet another new winner in terms of our GT3 trail for this year, but first-time winners in their careers within the championship. So great job done by Jack Mitchell and Jordan Witt. Let's have a look at the highlights of that race. It began, of course, behind the safety car. With the safety car peeled off, Sam DeHaan was the initial race leader, chased by Rob Collard, but the two McLarens on their toes very early on. Jordan Witt and Lewis Proctor working their way through the field. Jordan Witt looking particularly brave, going up towards the Wilson hairpin, dive-bombing Rob Collard, and then at the end of the lap there was a bit of a lean on Sam DeHaan that put him on the grass. That allowed through Lewis Proctor, as throwing it off was Adam Ballon. That dropped him and Phil Keane down the order, compromised their chances going into the second part of the race. They weren't the only ones in strife, however, because the BMWs were also a little bit agricultural. Nick Jones had a moment and oh so nearly got embroiled with Dean McDonald when he came back onto the road. Michael Igoe was exploring the worst of the weather. Will Moore was on full opposite lock in the Mustang when the pit window opened. Ram Racing brought both of its cars in early doors. Jordan Witt stayed out, and with a clear road, other than the back markers, that was able to get him further away from the GT3 opposition, ready for the second stint. Yelmer Berman had got himself onto the tail of teammate Patrick Kuyler, ran out of road, regrouped, fought back and attacked coming out of Wilson. Got up the inside and eventually took the place away. The Mercedes on target for 4th position. But it was a race win for Jordan Witt and Jack Mitchell. Phil Keane doing the fastest lap of the race in number 72 Lamborghini in that second stint, as Angus Fender was one with a number of dramas, slithering off the road repeatedly. Scott Malvern getting the Bentley up into the top 10. There was this little brush between Patrick Kuyler and Andrea Calderelli. It could have been a whole lot worse, as then Matt Cowley went to the A11, almost coming into the Wilson hairpin, got the car slowed down. Chris Wesmail also had a different look at the scenery, going across the grass on the S's and getting himself back onto the circuit. He also had a drama down at the approach to Palmer. But in the end, a very good race win for Jordan Witt and Jack Mitchell, and I was right, it is their first ever outright win, so a great job for the pair of them. And in GT4, a first win of the year too for Jamie Caroline and Dan Vaughan. So, 2 very happy first-time GT3 race winners, no doubt, and with them is Kelvin Fletcher.
Hello guys, well done. Jordan, I've got to say firstly, what a mega stint that was. I know you had the other McLaren behind you, you had very different lines. Was you aware just how well you were going in that stint?
Yeah, you know, the car really felt good this stint. It was a really good race. I felt like I just controlled it. I was changing the lines up, just trying to find the most grip. I finally managed to find that towards like halfway through my stint, and then from there we just carried on going.
And Jack, obviously, John did all the hard work. It was. It still wasn't easy for you because the conditions at one point were looking like they was worsening. So it was. You did well to keep it on the black stuff and bring it on for the win.
Yeah, like you said, Jordan done an amazing job to start with. Made my life a little bit easier. He brought a good jack up in front of Rob Collard, and we knew the threat was going to be Sandy. You could see his pace at the end; it was really strong. So he done an amazing job, and towards the end, I managed to put a nice gap to Wally, which just gave me a bit of breathing room just to keep the gap and sail it home for the win. So, but I just can't thank the team enough. We worked hard all weekend, and it's not been easy, but we got there in the end.
Well done, guys. Like I said, absolute mega stint. Congratulations to both of you.
Cheers, thank you. Thanks,
Been a long time coming, that win, but very well deserved as well, and not just for the drivers but for the team, and especially given the travails with the sister car. But it's not been an easy season, has it, for 2C's Motorsport, and these new McLarens now starting to come good. This team new this year, and a maiden win for Jordan Witt and for Jack Mitchell will be a very popular one, and it also helps to spice up the championship, doesn't it, because that takes points away from the others that were well placed coming into this first of two races here.
Yeah, absolutely. They move into 5th place in the championship now as well, and whilst I think it's a little too late for them to start thinking about a late championship challenge, that's definitely a top 5 result at the end of the season for them. I think will go down very, very nicely indeed. So just talk about GT4 as well in a moment, because Jamie Caroline and Dan Vaughan with that first victory of the year, they are now 10 points, or 9.5 points actually, clear at the top of the championship. So Kelvin Fletcher, that was a timely win for those two.
Guys, what a fantastic result for you and the Aston Martin. How was that first stint?
Yeah, it was difficult really. I think this morning in the warm-up it was a lot wetter, so we sort of prepared for the worst. Went slightly wrong with the pressures, but the car was solid. I knew obviously the people in front had success penalties from Donington, so it was about keeping the gap and then giving it over to Jamie for the second stint.
Jamie, I was last spoke to you at Brands Hatch where you had a terrific outing there. Sadly, I wasn't there myself at Donington, but this run of of great results just seems to be continuing, and it's great to see.
Yeah, I mean, we've been fairly consistent throughout the year. Hopefully we can maintain it in the race this afternoon. Obviously we have the success penalty, but I think the pace is there in the car and within the pairing to capitalise on that anyway. I'm not that worried about the penalty. I feel we can get a nice, fingers crossed, points haul going into Silverstone. Whether we want to try and go for a success penalty there or not, we don't know yet, but I suppose we'll have to see how it plays out.
Well done, guys, but I've got to say, you've got to do it all again for race 2.
No pressure.
And the rain is falling once again, so it may well be that they have a wetter track to cope with for that second race. Never mind the pit stop penalty, but a maiden victory. Perhaps it's been overdue, you could argue, but Dan Vaughan moving from Carrera Cup. Jamie Caroline, heartening to see that he's got a full season, because he's really struggled for budget and for a proper programme for the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, really talented driver there, making that transition from single-seaters to GTs, which many drivers attempt and not all so successfully. So Jamie, very quick in the wet as well. We know that from his Formula 4 antics from a few seasons ago, and he, I'm sure, will actually be quite happy to see that the rain clouds are continuing to gather here at Snetterton. It does rather have the feel of rain that's set in for the day now. It may not be absolutely bucketing it down, but there is just this consistent moisture in the air, so I think conditions for race 2 will probably be very similar to the ones we just saw in race 1, and that for the teams is a good thing. That consistency at least means they know what they're in for now going into that all-important second race.
Which, all being well, will be at 3:10, barring any further dramas to the timetable. Meantime, winning drivers making their way up onto the podium. So there we have the McLaren drivers for third place, as it turned out to be, on the line, namely Lewis Proctor and Ollie Wilkinson. There's a story to get to the bottom of there. For second place, collecting their trophies and then making their way to the podium for photographs, Rob Collard handing over the champagne to Sandy Mitchell. Rob, after so many years of rear-wheel drive touring cars, has adapted very, very well indeed to GT cars this season. And a different discipline of racing. He's doing the miles, of course, as well, because he's racing the World Challenge Europe in the Endurance Cup there. But second, Rob Collard and Sandy Mitchell. And then the race winners, making sure they've got the right trophies. step forward, and winners of round 7 of the British GT Championship, Jack Mitchell and Jordan Witt. For 2Cs Motorsport, it is a McLaren win here at Snetterton.
Incredible result for them, isn't it? And great to see them. Another new team and another new driver combo on the top step of the podium for SRO Motorsport. A bit of a race of two halves there. The 78 car scoring good points, nicking second place on the line. The 72 car, though, that early spin for Adam Ballon. Yes, Vilke was able to dig them out of the hole to some extent, and yes, they are up there on the Pro-Am podium, of course, but for their overall championship chances, they are now 21.5 points off the championship lead. It's not inconceivable that they could leave Snetterton mathematically out of contention for the title now, so they're no doubt a little disappointed about that.
Michael Igo and Andrea Calderelli making their way in the Pro-Am competition for the podium, and a very happy Michael Igo, whose racing experience doesn't go back over many seasons, but he's done a huge amount of miles in a short space of time and has had some great co-drivers as well to help him on the way. Ian Logie and Jelmer Berman come out on top, though, in the Pro-Am competition, so they've still not yet had an outright win, but it's a class win, or a subordinate class win, for Ian Logie, one of the quicker Ams, and Jelmer Berman, the gun for hire, helping him in the Mercedes 4th place overall. So the GT3 Pro-Am podium completed. Drivers make their way down the stairs, and then the drivers in GT4 being marshalled forward to collect trophies and champagne. So for their 3rd place, Patrick Kibble and Conor O'Brien step up onto the podium, double winners and more valuable points. They may have now lost that class lead, but they have still managed to bank and are still very much in contention with 2 races to go, and the Silverstone race of particular importance because it's got the greater number of points ready to be afforded. For 2nd place in GT4, Jordan Collard and Patrick Mathieson. So anything Dad can do, Jordan can do as well. Secondly GT4, secondly GT3 for the Collards, and it's meant to be, I think, Rob and Ricky sharing the car in the Spa 24 Hours later this month. And there for TF Sport, Tom Ferrier's team, a very popular win for the first time this year to Jamie Caroline and to Dan Vaughan. They come out on top in GT4 in round 7 of the championship.
Yeah, they'll be feeling confident ahead of that 2nd race. I think they'll be feeling confident going to Silverstone as well. That should be a good Aston Martin circuit. Traditionally, those front-engine cars have gone quite well at Silverstone. In Pro-Am, it was a bit of a foregone conclusion that Ewan Hankey and Mia Fluett would win the Pro-Am category. They're the only entrant here this weekend, but a solid overall result in the end for SRO Motorsport, who are sitting inside the top half dozen in the championship points overall, and it's a difficult job for those two in a field made up almost entirely of Silver Cup entrants for a Pro-Am entry like them, a single car entry as well, with the exception of the extra car they had out at Donington last time. Yeah, not too bad at all, and of course an overall race winner already this year in GT4 too.
So a fascinating first race for the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. More to come later in the day as well. Championship shuffles, different drivers of course to start, because the driver that brought the car home in race 1 will start race 2. And who knows what the weather conditions have in store. There is a bit of a break in the cloud, but the weather forecast is not exactly for a good day. So it's going to be another intriguing race later on, and of course from a very different looking grid. Hopefully we'll have the extra Mercedes on that grid as well. So 3:10, all being well, is when we'll be back racing. For now, from Andy McEwen and David Addison, it's goodbye.